shall fear no evil. Cause thanks to King George and his rainbow cabinet, today murder is legal. God, I know that it's wrong to kill my brother for what he hasn't done. And as the flames back in the sky, it sounds like heaven is falling. It sounds like heaven is falling. You promised me a new day is dawning. I see 1,000 points of light, like so many points of hatred, shame, and horror.
Hello, and welcome to Swell Season Surf Radio. I am your host, Tyler Brewer. Really excited for you all to be here to hear this episode. I'm really pumped on this. It's a real banger of an episode, I think. I've got two really great guests. Two of the notorious literary minds of the surf world. We have a friend of mine, Mr. Jamie Brisick. Some of you know him as a former pro surfer. He was a editor-in-chief at Surfy magazine. He has written numerous incredible books. One of them I love, We Approach Our Martinis with Such High Expectations. It is a great book. And he did also the Westerly Windia book. And then, so we have Mr. Brisick on. We're going to talk a little bit about coronavirus and what he's seen in LA. And then I move on to this gentleman. Some of you know him as the editor-in-chief, the writer, and provocateur of Beach Grit. This is Mr. Chaz Smith that we have on the show, and I am really excited. We have a really fun back and forth. He's great. He's very charming, so it's like really fun to talk to him, really enjoyable, and he loves to be, there's definitely a contrarian vibe to him, and so it's always fun to engage in that way. So it's a great show. Really excited. Got to mention, don't forget to follow us on Instagram at swellseasonsurf. And of course, you can always find us on wax.radio, which we are streaming live, the show. And wax.radio, it has all sorts of other awesome shows on it. I highly recommend checking out. It streams 24/7, so go check that out. And just again, hoping everyone is safe, healthy, and taking this coronavirus seriously still. Hopefully we are getting past the worst, but we will see what happens. And I hope everyone is being safe and social distancing and washing your hands. So, without further ado, we are going to now talk to Mr. Jamie Brisick. I had a couple technical difficulties, so it goes in and out of two stations for about 4 minutes, but there's good stuff in there. And then it's smooth sailing all from there, and then I'll see you on the other side and intro Mr. Chaz Smith. So until then, enjoy.
So there's and then the weather's been really kind here, so I definitely think it's unfair for me to sort of say I've been doing great, because I know a lot of people have not.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I mean, I think it's fine. It's good. I'm glad you're doing good. First off, plus you've had a rough year last year, with the fires and everything.
Sure.
2 years ago, so you've had a rough go. So I'm super glad you're okay. Whereas, it's weird. It's just I was pretty good. I think I was feeling in a nice little protective bubble, and I was working every day. I had my office, so that sort of stuff was totally good. And then I was okay not going out, and I was even okay not surfing a little bit. But then the reality started to set in. And then I think last week I did an interview with two friends who are, on the front lines in the ER. Wow. That was pretty sobering conversation.
I'm sure.
Those guys, it's they got families. Their wives are both, also in the ER working. So it's whew. I guess so all that stuff started to accumulate, and I definitely feel I felt more emotional, I guess, over the last few days.
No, and that makes sense. I mean, for so many of us, this has like created this sort of surplus of time, and I say that with the bias. I don't have children. I know a lot
Yeah.
of folks have their kids home, and that's a whole full-time gig.
Yeah,
But
I don't have kids either, so yeah.
Yeah, but definitely, I think for a lot of us, or at least a lot of the people I know, there's been a kind of slackening of duty, or I mean, people are sort of in their pajamas all day long.
Yeah.
Which is very, very different to the healthcare workers who, have been like called to duty in crazy ways. So yeah, I feel for them, and I hear what you're saying. No problem at all. No problem at all.
So, Jamie, how are you doing? I mean, out there, like in terms of what are you seeing around you? Do you go out for walks? Are you?
Yeah, I've been walking every day. I'm in Los Angeles. And I mean, here's the thing is we had, it was probably a month ago now, we had this incredibly sunny weekend where we just, the whole like sort of shelter at home, stay in place, quarantine started, but so many people went to the beach because it was a beautiful day in Los Angeles. And it was just sort of a mockery of the self-quarantine. So then the governor and Mayor Garcetti here in Los Angeles sort of laid it down heavy, like, there's no way, the beaches are closed, parks are closed, hiking trails are closed. And it really changed everything to we just became aware of the kind of what's at stake here. And I think everyone's been incredibly good at it. And as we know from watching the news, the curve has flattened quite a lot. It hasn't hit here anywhere near to the degree that we thought it was going to. So when I walk around, I mean, pretty much everyone's in a mask, and there are people exercising on the streets, and there are people taking walks on the beach whenever they can. And I know people who are surfing at first light, and then they're surfing right before dark. But for the most part, I mean, I think as a city, and I think maybe because LA is fairly densely populated, not to the degree obviously that New York is, but there is, when you feel your civic duty when you're so close to your neighbors,
Yeah. I also wanted to, like, how are the surfers reacting out there? Like, are they accepting it, or are they defiant?
I think at this point they're very defiant. Here's the thing. It's kind of this, it's interesting because it's sort of this moving target. Like when the surf ban first happened, I thought, oh, this would be an interesting piece. And I started to follow it. And that coincided with some of the worst stuff coming on the news from Chris Como on CNN, who I was watching, and it was heartbreaking. And I actually thought, like, I don't even know if I want to get behind a story with a bunch of surfers whining that they've had their toys taken away, so to speak. But then things sort of loosened up, and then the surf ban seemed to be worldwide. And then it was really interesting watching all these hardcore surfers, pro surfers, top level surfers, very influential, kind of shift their social media feeds to, instead of the great clip of the air reverse or the great barrel or whatever, to like the movies they're watching.
I know.
Yeah. And no, I'm sure you saw the same. And it was fascinating because I thought, oh, it's really interesting to see how, there's almost this sense of like revisiting our past. And I've watched that happen in 1991, basically. There was a recession. The surf industry really shrunk. And I remember the sort of bubble of late 80s surfing had burst, and it was almost as if we surfers, collectively, like, tried to find our roots again. Like, it's not about the OP Pro with 400,000 people on the beach or whatever number. It's about like connecting with the soul and riding waves. And the Rip Curl had the Search campaign. And so I almost felt like, oh, there's another version of that happening right now under quarantine. And that made me interested. So I ended up writing a piece for Huck Magazine, for Huck Online. And
I loved it.
Yeah, thanks. And so I did talk to a lot of people, and it was interesting. But most people were kind of trying to do the right thing, and I think in many ways being aware of the kind of public announcement of whatever their take was, and hence being very careful as pro athletes are. They weren't really saying what they really think for the most part. Kelly Slater was very frank about it all, and he thought it had gone too far. And now at this point, I think everyone's kind of losing it. And just one last piece. I know I'm being long-winded.
Yeah, no.
I've been trying to like not lose my mind and stay physically fit. And I've been cycling like up in the Hollywood Hills. And I come down those hills and I'm thinking, this is so much more dangerous than going surfing. So there is, I think it's sort of unanimous at this point. Most people think that, look, close the beach. It's a very privileged thing to say, but close the beaches all you want, but let us go out and kind of clear our heads and stay sane via the surf. Yeah. What about you? What are you finding?
I mean, it's weird. Like I'm of the mindset that I should not travel to go surf. I shouldn't really leave my zip code even. I'm trying to stay pretty local for the most part. Once a week I do a bike ride with my wife somewhere in Brooklyn, and that's about it really. Not even very far, but it's something, and then, and I see a lot of people surfing. I see a lot of the more core guys actually are not surfing. Like a lot of friends of mine that, are normally on it or have not been as much. But I think that's starting to crack. And then like there were waves on Friday and Saturday. And it was beautiful out and it was so packed. And it's just like I'm just wondering if some of these people are driving or if they are taking the subway. If they're taking the subway, they're being really dangerous and, just super irresponsible, I think. I think for me, there's a few reasons not to surf. And like a lot of people have probably heard me on the show, but I say is like, one is that I don't want to get injured. I'm trying not to get hurt. And I just know like Murphy's Law and like, if I go somewhere where there are people, I just don't trust the people more so. I trust my abilities. It's the other people I don't trust. I get worried about getting into an accident driving sometimes, and like I haven't driven really in weeks either, and just like those things I worry about. But then there's like something more about sacrificing.
Yeah.
And, my mom is a nurse. I have a lot of friends who are in the front lines. So for me, I'm like, well, fuck, these people are having to give up a lot. Mm-hmm. Like they're putting themselves on the line, their lives on the line, their families on the line. It's really precarious for a lot of them. And not only that, but we don't even know if the states are going to be able to pay them in like 6 months. That's also a whole thing too. So it's just like, I feel like, wow, if me not going surfing and not going places really will help slow this down, speed up the process and, really lower the amount of stress and strain that it's putting on all of them, I can hold out. They're sacrificing so much more. It's just surfing. I love to surf. It's killing me. This is like one of the best springs I've seen in years. Mm-hmm. And it's like torture watching, but I'm like, dude, it's so small. And I also know a lot of people here in the city living in very small, cramped spaces. Like imagine if you were stuck in your old place in the city for this long.
Yeah.
Like that. That's, and those people aren't complaining. And so when I see people on the West Coast, particularly Southern California, I'm like, like it's not that big a deal. It's just surfing. And then the other thing I feel is like when they start to feel targeted by the police and this whole argument about being like, oh, it's unfair. They're targeting surfers. I don't know if they realize like how ridiculous that sounds. Cause I have probably a bunch of neighbors here who are minorities and African-Americans who would say, dude, that's my life every day.
Yeah. No,
I get targeted, for just walking down the street. And these, I love how white people get all enraged when they feel they're being targeted. And you're like, dude, like, you don't understand how privileged you have it. So to complain about this, like, are you going to join the fight now to help Black Lives Matter? Are you going to support those causes? Because that, to me, I feel like is like, get some perspective.
No, I love what
you're saying on that.
No, it's really interesting to hear this, Tyler. And I think everything you're saying completely resonates with me. And having lived in New York for over a decade, I